I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello, happy Monday. It is November 20th, which is a special day for me because, first of all, it is my grandpa's birthday and he is one of the coolest people ever. I probably should have interviewed him for today, but I didn't realize his birthday was falling on a Monday until too late. Anyway, happy birthday, Grandpa, if you're listening. Also, it is purely coincidental, but an awesome coincidence that his birthday is also the holiday Absurdity Day. So happy Absurdity Day to you. I hope you do something completely absurd. Anyway, this is episode number 123, so you can go to the show notes, www.mandiem.com/episode 123, and today I am chatting with fantastic Mike Casavant. He was introduced to me by a previous guest, Quentin Allums, you may remember from a few months ago, which is actually, I think, the most downloaded of all of my guests so far. So big shoes to fill, but don't worry, this isn't a competition. And I appreciate the incredible people that are being sent my way from Q and others back in Milwaukee. Mike used to be a rock star, and I guess he still is, just in a different way that involves less metal performance, and then changed to being a strength and conditioning coach, and then parlayed that into being a really impressive entrepreneur. And I think you'll like his story. Seems like a big teddy bear to me, but I don't know. I'll let you judge for yourself. All right, without any more introduction, here is Mike Casavant. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. I am with another recommendation from Quentin Allums from several episodes back. This time it is Mike Casavant. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Mandy. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so excited to hear your story because we've been communicating for a little while and are finally making it work. So
that's awesome. Beautiful. Yeah, me too. I'm super excited.
All right. So Q recommended that you would be on the show, obviously because you've made some bold moves, hence the title. Sure. Let's hear your story.
Oh gosh, so I guess I would say the last probably 7 years or so, I got into the fitness industry, and that's been kind of my primary focus up until probably the last year and a half or so. Prior to getting in the fitness industry as a professional musician, so for most of my 20s, I was touring the world playing in a band called the Acacia Strain, as well as a band called Burn in Silence. So pretty heavy music, pretty off the wall.
It's funny to me because I feel like at least Acacia Strain sounds like it could also be like meditation music. I feel like a lot of metal bands, their names, you're like, is that metal or is that like a new age while you light incense and
yeah. Well, it's funny you said that too, because what's interesting is that most metal bands and hardcore musicians on the road, especially when they're touring, listen to like only pop music in the bus or van. Like, no one wants to listen to metal because it's like that's all you hear all day, every day. Sure. With all the bands you're on tour with. So, usually Lady Gaga, that type of stuff is usually predominantly played through everyone's mix.
Never expect, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And most of the guys that you think are like super crazy and angry, they're like the sweetest, most kindest, like good-hearted people you ever meet. It's awesome. It's super funny.
That's hilarious. I grew up in like a group of bikers, and that's the same
Oh,
thing.
interesting.
Like, the scariest looking one is the one that's probably like gonna, help you out in a hard time.
Yeah.
Cry in a movie.
Totally. There was actually an interview I did, I think it was somewhere in California when I was on tour, and the interviewer wrote about it. I think it was in oh my gosh, Hit Parader or something like that. I forget what magazine it was, but it was, and he mentioned the fact that like, he goes, I saw this band, these guys are absolutely insane. I interviewed the guitar player and he like gave me a hug and he was the nicest dude ever. That's how I'm just like, hey man, what's up? How are you? And he's like, meanwhile I'm on stage, jumping off stage, like just going like, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's totally, the personas are really interesting.
Yeah. My stepdad is actually one of the aforementioned bikers, and I would meet other scary bikers who would tell me they were afraid of my stepdad, who would also like sneak do the dishes for me. Like if my mom's like, oh, you have to do the dishes. Like if she fell asleep early, he would like be like, nah, I'll do the dishes. And or like,
awesome.
You can have another cookie. Like, okay, we know who the teddy bear is.
Well, it is. It's always. I think it's like the perception of what metal and hardcore is actually like. Yeah, it's angry. It's a release, but it's also one of those things where I always talk about this. Like, angry music actually makes me happy.
Yeah,
so
get it all out.
I'm like,
your time.
Yeah, I know. Or if I'm listening to too much like pop or something, I'm like, I just need something like abrasive. And I'm like driving, I'm like, yes, this feels really good. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like my meditation music, which is odd, which it shouldn't be. But
there it is. It's all full circle now.
It totally, exactly. So I spent most of my 20s on tour and playing music from, I would say probably, 18 till probably 27, give or take, 26, 27. And then actually the last show I played was 2010 at Leeds University in England. And it was funny. After I got off the stage, I remember thinking to myself, it was like I was at that point where I knew I wanted to do the fitness thing for sure. And I wasn't quite fulfilled as much as I used to be with music. And I got to a point where, on tour, you have so much downtime. So I was just studying all the time. All my friends used to make fun of me, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we should go out and party. Like, you're reading exercise physiology books and physics. I'm like, yeah, it's really interesting to me. So long story short, I basically self-educated myself on tour. And then my last show I played in England, I remember seeing this group of guys. They were probably, I would say late 30s, early 40s, still trying to kind of make it. And they were eating like raviolis out of a can in their van. And I was like, I don't want that to be me. You know what I mean? And Acacia Strain is a successful band, no question. And they still tour to this day and they do well. But it was like, I just knew where my mind was shifting, and it wasn't sort of the trajectory that I originally had at a younger age to where I was at mid-20s. I just knew like I'm destined for other things, and I never wanted to be known as just a musician or just a football player. I always had other interests, and so I think I like to do things where I burn the candle and go all in 1,000%, and then I get to a point where is it something that I want to continue burning, or is it something that I'm kind of burnt out and ready for something else? And so I felt like I burnt the candle for music professionally as far as I felt like I could get to. And then I knew after seeing those guys in the van, I flew home from England that weekend, and I just said to the guys, I'm kind of good. I think I'm ready to do something else. And they sort of knew it. They could sort of tell I was sort of like leaning to kind of wanting to sort of challenge and try some new stuff. And they were supportive of it, and we ended on good terms. And I would say probably within a month or so, month and a half after I left the band, I got an internship with a company called Total Performance Sports, they're a legendary strength conditioning facility in Boston. And the owner, CJ Murphy, became basically my mentor at that stage. Okay. And so I was there for about 2 years, learning everything I possibly could, working with every athlete you can imagine, and kind of being in this world where I went from like being on stage and going nuts to sort of like being in this professional facility and trying, but still there was a parallel of the creativity was still there for me, because I could sort of look at someone's body, know exactly what's going on by how their shoulders are placed or by how they're walking. And it was interesting because that was one thing I realized when I did start working there. I had a natural instinct for it, but I didn't even know like what I actually knew until it was pointed out to me. Mm-hmm. And I'm a terrible test taker. I'm so bad at taking tests. But if you gave me, like, if you wanted me to display and show you everything, I can. But a lot of times, like, testing for some reason has always been this really challenging thing for me. And I remember actually when I was taking my test to qualify for the internship, Murph, the owner, was like, "What is wrong with you? We just talked about this. You know all this stuff." And I was like, "Really?" I'm like, "This seems different to me." And then like he would explain to me what the question was. Like, "Oh no, it's this." And I explained him the answer. He goes, "Right. So why aren't you choosing C?" And I'm like, that's what it is. But for some reason, I just like, it's like sometimes if it's worded differently or how it's perceived.
Well, and they have the tricky things to distract you as well.
Correct.
My husband is in a similar field and has worked a lot on his test taking skills because he's for board exams. And
totally. And I think there's definitely, I mean, I know there's merit to obviously, I mean, knowing stuff, but I also think there's a bit more merit to actually displaying it and taking someone from point A to point B, walking through them with every movement and kind of on the fly, like, okay, if this person has X, Y, Z going on, what are you going to do to help them? I'm like, oh, sure, I can walk you through the whole process. But for some reason, the written component and seeing it never gelled with me. So that was something I kind of knew that from an early age because I don't like labeling myself, but I definitely have attention issues and things like that. But it never was a good person in school. However, but I excelled creatively. I excelled in fitness, and Murph actually was one of the best, I think, accolades for me was that during that time there was about 15 other people trying to become an intern there, and he gave me the opportunity, even though I hadn't gone to college. These other guys had exercise physiology degrees and all this stuff, but he's like, dude, you're great with people. You're super funny, and people like gravitate towards you. So you'll be an excellent trainer. Anything that you don't know, I'm going to teach you, and you already have a good base. And I was like, okay, great. So it was kind of like that. That's sort of when I started realizing I have a knack for kind of making people really comfortable very quickly. Yeah. And because I'm never a threat. So like we were just talking about with bikers and everything, people see me initially. I'm a big guy. I have, usually a beard and tattoos. And so from first glance, you may think, wow, this dude's insane. Especially if someone sees me working out, I'm out of my mind when I work. I'm very
metal while you work out?
Usually, but it's more like I'm very aggressive when I train. I'm like very I swear a lot. It's awful.
Do you drop the weights? Are you one of the throw down the weights guys?
So there's I call that weight dropping etiquette. So I do it more so if it's a really heavy lift or something where it's like, it's just something that's like, how can I explain it? Like I see people, especially at a CrossFit gym, like they have like 25 pounds weights on their sides. And it's like, they're doing maybe a clean and jerk. And then they just like bomb it to the ground. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what is wrong with you?
I think I'm in your world a little bit. My husband's a physical therapist, and
awesome.
Now, he's in a Division I sports physical therapy fellowship at USC. And last week we work out at the USC gym, and I was like, okay, he has 35s on each. And
no need to.
Some guy, and I'm like, 6 a.m. and my Bluetooth headphones were out of batteries, so I was like crabby, I was tired, and this guy was just one rep at a time, drop.
Oh, it's the worst.
And I'm like every 45 seconds or 2 minutes, he's like dropping his weights. I'm like, I don't think he can control his he can't put it down. I'm like, he's got Napoleon complex. I'm like,
no, totally. And that's something that absolutely irritates me to no end. But for me, it's more, I grunt. I'm not even grunt, but I'm very I breathe very heavy, mainly because there's a breathing technique that I've sort of adopted over the years that it's the way to sort of counterbalance movement. So how can I explain this? So like if for example, with kettlebell swings, if you're swinging, I breathe against the weight. So every time it's coming up or down, my pattern is never going with it. It's actually going against it. And it keeps my heart rate at a really controlled place.
I think I do that too. I notice if I am listening to an instructor during lifting and they tell me to breathe, I'm always doing the opposite of what they say. When I remember to breathe.
Yes. Yeah, no, right. I know.
I'm guilty of not sometimes, which I know.
No, it's awesome. It's incredible. Typically I'm pretty aggressive when I train, and I typically will work out by myself unless my training buddies are around, and but we're all serious about it. So it's very kind of, I'm big on environment, right? So I think you're a product of your environment. And I remember having this conversation with an old client of mine that wanted to squat 500 pounds. And he was like, dude, that's all I've ever wanted to do. I can never break 450. And I said, okay. And he was a remote client for me. And I was like, all right, so where do you train right now? And he was training at the Gold's Gym. I'm like, all right, so who's the strongest guy there? What does he squat? He was like 470. I go, okay, so find a new gym. I'm like, find the gym that's a powerlifting gym that the guy, when you walk in, the girl's squatting 550, and that's like, you know what I mean? Like, go find that and
Don't
see.
be the biggest fish in the pond.
Totally.
Yeah.
That was honestly, when I first walked into TPS in Boston, there was like these two girls that became really good friends of mine that were trainers, and they were like, yeah, one of them was warming up with like 315, and I was like, come on, you serious? And it was, she taught me so much too, especially about like just body tension and how to position yourself correctly in certain movements. But I just remember seeing these freaks like squatting 800 pounds like on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm like, are you kidding? What? I'm like, that's my threshold now. Are you kidding me? So I think if you're trying to achieve something that's kind of out of your sort of vortex and circle of influence, I think you have to be very, very diligent about looking external and finding, like, if you want to achieve X and no one in your direct circle is doing that or better, then you need to find someone that's been doing it, and they can teach you their ways and learn from them and shoot for that.
Yeah. So if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
I absolutely, I'm very big on auditing my circle and making sure that like the people that I have around me are very, they're either smarter than me in certain sectors, or they influence me enough that I'm like, God, I learned so much from this person every time we talk, or they recommend so many good tips on different things. And and I'm sure you've probably gone through this sort of scene where I think, if the more I always call it dead weight in a lot of ways, and I'm always like, God, like I feel, why do I feel so emotionally heavy? And then I start to think about, I'm like, well, who's in my life that's maybe a drama-filled maniac or something? You know what I mean? And so, and sure enough, there's usually one or two people that maybe that may be correlating kind of how I'm feeling subconsciously. And then I realize, I'm like, I got to stop talking to them. And then I do, and I'm sort of looked at as like a jerk because of it. But I'm like, dude, I can't be around people with like, I hate drama. I hate negativity. I think negativity is great when it's used in a positive way. So taking something that's very negative and finding a way to go, okay, this is fire for me, and I'm going to go out and absolutely destroy this as a motivator to do something great. But I think negativity at face value, people focus on that, and it's almost like, that's why I don't like Facebook as much anymore, because I go through my feed and I'm like, oh my God, no one says anything great anymore. It's like, it's awful. And everyone complains, but there's no solution to the complaint. And I'm always like, if you have time to complain about it, literally just sit down, write out a plan, and figure your stuff out to go figure out whatever you're complaining about.
Absolutely.
It's so I'm sure, have you seen that a lot too with your your growth as an entrepreneur as well?
Definitely. I think I need to be better at actually doing it. I've been told a million times that that's something that needs to be done. And there's still a few people that it's really hard to audit, as you say.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it is. It's challenging for sure.
Absolutely. I know that's what you need to do. So
it is. It's almost like a cleanse in a lot of ways. And it may not be the best in the interim, but then as you sort of start going along, you're like, wow, I actually feel really good that sort of person, it maybe isn't in my life as much anymore, or not at all. So it's a good learning curve for sure. Where was I going? I was just talking
before we go.
Yes. Oh yeah, please go ahead.
I'm curious because I think I probably have a guess, but you never actually said what your role was is in the fitness industry. I know you're interning in a strength and conditioning environment.
Mm-hmm.
Strength and conditioning coach, personal trainer.
Yeah, I mean,
combo.
I say more of more personal trainer, strength coach, give or take. But so after TPS, I found a location in an area called Natick, Massachusetts. And basically, it was all set up as a CrossFit gym. It was inside of a warehouse, and it was amazing. But the owner actually, it wasn't a CrossFit affiliate or anything, but he had it set up in a way that it was just for him, really, and his employees. And a friend of mine actually went in to get his car detailed, because they had this whole setup. It was about 37,000 square feet. His part of the gym was about 3,500 square feet. And then there was like a car dealing sort of car dealer, car detailing section, and sort of just kind of different things all around. And so he went to get his car detailed, and he was walking around. He's like, "Wow, this place is sweet. Like, whose gym is this?" And the guy told him, he's like, "Oh yeah, the guy upstairs. It's like $50 a month for a membership. It's open gym all the time. You can come in whenever you want." And he's like, "I got to tell Mike about this place." So he called me, and literally, like, I had an opening in my day. I had about 2 hours to kill, so I just cruised over, walked in, saw the place. I was like, "Hey, is the owner here? Can I talk to him? Like, I'd like to talk to him right now." And he gave me a tour of the whole facility, and I just kind of propositioned him. I'm like, "Listen, man, I'm in the process of building my book. I've got about 15 clients right now. I'm really looking to go out on my own, and I'd like to, and I'm trying to find a facility that I can work out of to grow my brand. How do you feel about me coming in here to do that?" And it was like, I think it was like an hour conversation, and we shook hands, and he said, "Listen, I'm totally down for it. Let's see what happens. Here's the key, just let me know what's going on." And we worked out a really good deal. I basically negotiated a deal with him that in the very beginning stages as a personal trainer, it's very challenging. I would have clients sometimes at 6 a.m. and then would have nothing till 6 p.m. And I was just like going out of my mind, like, how do I grow myself? How do I brand myself? What do I need to do socially? How do I market? And this is back, let's see, I started Iron Force Athletics probably 2012, I think, or something like that. Was it 2012? Yeah, 2012. And so when I got into that facility, it was like, okay, this guy's giving me an opportunity. He just gave me the keys to this place. My pay scale with him was basically, I would pay him a % of the sessions that I actually worked in a given month, as opposed to a set rent fee. Okay. And we kind of kept that for the majority of my stay there, because he was just happy because I filled the place within probably 5 to 6 months. We had an influx of new interest. I became known as the guy to get everyone really strong, and started training a lot of CrossFit athletes, and started training high school to collegiate athletes and stay-at-home moms. And that was just kind of a thing. And it was really interesting. And so long story short, that was kind of my I guess my first venture into business, and that was kind of my first big venture, so to speak. And we expanded from 3,500 to almost 7,000 square feet in about 2 years, and It was just a great experience for me. And what we ended up finding out is that we had a model that was really interesting, because the gym itself, we had multiple different independent contractors working out of that facility. Mm-hmm. So there was basically 7 different businesses under one roof, and utilizing the same gym, but branding themselves. And I was like, that's such an interesting thing, because I found a niche with personal trainers at some point in their given career. If they want to stick with it, they always want to go out and do their own thing. So, but typically when they're transitioning, it becomes a really big issue where the cost is really large initially. And so I said, why don't we market this? So if you're a personal trainer looking to go out on your own, this is kind of like your cushion to come in, train people, build yourself. And then when you're ready to move on, then you can. And we had about 7 or I think it was 7 to 10 people eventually that were working out of there that came in. And then within about a year and a half, went out to do their own thing. And I was so pumped to see that. It was really cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Where are you from originally? Are you from the East Coast?
Yeah, so Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, an area called Newton.
All right. And then you just said that the fitness strength coaching was your first foray into business. What have you done since then, and how did that transition go? Sure.
So I was focused on obviously a lot of in-person training, and then right around 2014, I think it was. Yeah, it was about 3 years. 2014 is when I started focusing on articles and blogging, in particularly. And I think I just wrote about this, but I went on a yoga retreat actually with my ex-girlfriend, and in Belize. And while I was there, I remember it was it was an amazing experience all around, but I had no cell phone. I had nothing really, no access to really internet. And it was kind of like a really good unplugging sort of week.
Sure.
And towards the end of the week, I remember I was brainstorming a lot. I had all these ideas, and I was like, I got to figure something out. I have to go online. I want to do something online, but I don't know what I want to do yet. And then I came up with this whole sort of subscription-based model that was going to target the CrossFit industry, but I didn't really know which sector I wanted to focus on. And when I came back to Boston, I ended up joining this Facebook group called CF Masters, and I had about 17,000 members, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of members. And so I started to literally just go through the whole feed, looking at all the athletes that were in there. A lot of them were posting videos of them working out, and I would watch them lift. I'm like, who I have to kind of comment and give them tips or give them guidance about their lifts. And within about 2 weeks, I was spending about 5 hours a day on every day for just kind of providing value to these people. And I felt like, God, these guys are, men and women are 50, 55 years old, and they're slaying it like better than most 20-year-olds I've ever seen. So it really impressed me so much. And right around that, like the 2 to 3 week mark, I remember I just said, you know what, I'm going to offer an 8-week strength program and see if people bite. And I had over 300 athletes sign up within 48 hours. And it was like, I think it was $25 is what I offered it. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, I'm like sitting behind my computer in my underwear. I'm on my table. I'm like, I just made almost $10,000 in like 2 days doing like nothing. Well, nothing, but like, I realized I'm like, wait a minute, there's something to this. I have to do more of this and seek this out. So, that became sort of when I started transitioning my business from solely in person to, at that time, probably 50-50 online and in person. And then within probably 6 months, I went probably 80-20 online to in person. And then it probably went down to 90-10. And I kind of had a couple of in-persons that I kept more because of the business relationships I had with them. They were really interesting people. They had they had a great circle of influence, and they were constantly feeding me knowledge, which I was paying them really in retrospect to just be with them. Yeah. So that became a huge focus for me. And then right around this past year, I would say before I had moved, I started kind of pulling back from social in general. I started to kind of I knew I was ready to rebrand myself or do something a little bit different. And it sort of reached that 5 to 6 year mark where I kind of find this sort of sweet spot. And I'm like, all right, I'm sort of close to 10 years doing something. Do I want to keep doing this or do I want to change? I love the fitness industry. It's always been a huge passion of mine. It's something that I think it's been very good to me. And I felt like the master's division, when I started doing what I was doing, there was nobody really doing that. And then probably within 7 months or so, 8 months, all of a sudden you started seeing a lot of companies pop up with master specific programming, remote coaching, all these different things. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I was kind of like one of those things where I was, oh, it's cool. I'm glad I actually helped sort of shape that in a way. And then it became a little bit oversaturated, and I just found that that market was, I was putting out so much and not really receiving what I felt like I should be. And the second we started to kind of talk about raising our prices, it was like people didn't want to pay that. And it just kind of, I realized the market, what I built was great, but I had not as much freedom as I wanted. And I was working 90-hour plus weeks and nonstop. And I lost friends because when I first started, I lost girlfriends or whatever. But I just realized that model, that was supposed to be to kind of give me freedom, and actually I felt like I was in prison in a lot of ways. I felt like I couldn't walk away from my phone for 5 minutes without having to answer someone, and it was awful. So I just knew that eventually I would have to make a change. And this last year, I sort of pulled back. I stopped really posting as much stuff on social, and I was really I went more internal for me. And during that process, I realized a few of the clients I was training in person, actually a few of the clients that I train out here now in Milwaukee, were traveling CEOs, and they travel all the time. And I'm like, man, this is really interesting. And so that became a pretty big focus for me this past year. And realizing that, these guys are multimillionaires and they have so much influence and so much knowledge, but when it came to fitness and nutrition, they just didn't have a clue about anything. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So that's become a focus for sure this past year. And then through that, I've always kind of consulted with my clients. One of my favorite things to do is to, I love helping people achieve a fitness goal or whatever it is they're trying to get. But a bigger focus for me became consulting and just relationship building. I love to hear people's issues. I always ask people what's your rose and thorn is in your business. Ooh. And so, because people always want to talk to you and say, oh man, things are great. But meanwhile, they're probably, borderline, bankrupt and they're going absolutely crazy. But so that my thorn is this. And so the thorn is where I thrive, because I'm like, all right, let's talk about your thorn. And and it's interesting, like when you personal training is interesting because it's kind of a foot in a really interesting door. And then you become a trainer for them and a coach to guide, but then you also become a therapist. And then you also become the sort of person that they can leverage and call you whenever there's something going on. And so I make sure very quickly with any clients I've worked with in the past or current, they know from day one, they're like, yep, I can call Mike and talk to him about things I can't talk to my significant other or my partners or anything, because they can't show weakness to anybody. And then they are so prideful about that. But with me, they're like, no, man, I can bounce ideas off you. And I know you have a lot of influence and a lot of people that you can connect me to. So let's talk about what's going on with me. And so I started to kind of make a lot of connections for people, or I'd be the sort of middle person to go, Mandy, I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so because I know you two are going to connect and do some crazy stuff together. And this past year, I made probably five instrumental connections for some of my clients that to this day, they're like, dude, if you didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have made over $5 million this year off of that one connection. And I'm like, yeah, that was just an email for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so now what I sort of realized is like, I do have
you to dinner or something.
Totally, yeah, okay. Absolutely, no, yeah. They've paid it forward in many of ways, and definitely as far as even just new introduction. Like what's what I think is great for me is introductions. I love to be introduced to other people, and a lot of these guys that I work with, they're so well connected. It's like, oh, who do you want to meet? Like, what do you need? And so I also like to kind of have those cards to pull whenever I need to. This is speaking of, there's actually one I'm pulling this month, which is interesting. So that's what I'm glad we're talking about. But it's usually, I always love to, I'm very selfless. I do things not with no thought of anything in return. I typically just do it because I generally love to see people happy and connecting and improving their lives. And then typically what will happen is, well, hey, Mike, what can I do for you? Like, my God, like you do so much, like how can I help you? And I'm usually like, I don't know, whatever. You know what I mean? So
I've been there.
You know what I mean? I'm just like, I don't know, man.
Leave me a review on my podcast again.
Yeah, seriously, right. And it seems so minuscule in a lot of ways. And then I think because I'm very big on integrity and on authenticity. Those are two things that I'm very prideful about, those two things, just because of the fact that I feel like, if I'm doing something with no integrity and I'm not authentic about it, like people will see that and they'll see right through it. And it's not something that I ever want to be known for. I like to be really on the surface as much as possible. And I like to kind of just, do things that I know I'm putting my best interest in and I'm fully invested in the process. And so during the connecting and sort of consulting, I started working with Quentin, and we were kind of working on stuff together off and on, just like different meetings we'd have. And he'd tell me some problems he was having. I give him some advice. I talk to him about my problems. He'd give me some advice. And then just these last few months, we started kind of really focusing and realizing that like we're both the same person in so many ways. Yeah. And then we just kind of realized that like I'm transitioning essentially out of Iron Force Athletics officially by the end of the year. That'll be dissolved. And I'm really only doing the training portion with this sort of more CEO sector at a smaller scale. But my focus is personal branding for entrepreneurs essentially, and helping them creatively tell their story online. That's pretty much what we're trying to do. And so now I'm working with Q with Mad Genie, and it's been awesome ever since.
How did you two meet?
Really weird, actually. I swiped left on Shaper. I don't know if you're familiar with that app yet.
No.
It's a beautifully crafted, awesome app. I've met probably three great people, Quentin being one of them. It's a networking app. It's literally like you'll get, I think it's 15 or 16 recommendations every day. And you look at them, read their profile, and you're like, yeah, this is someone I definitely want to connect with for coffee or a call. And I've met some, yeah, I would say probably 75%, 70% of the people that you'll connect with are really awesome on there. And I met Q through Shaper. It was the weirdest thing and totally fluke, but we grabbed coffee and I was like, this dude's like nuts. And I could see, but when I say nuts, I mean, like, I just knew he was brilliant in so many regards. And when we connected, it was like, I didn't have to explain myself to him. He didn't have to explain himself to me. I understood exactly what he was thinking before he even knew what he was thinking. And we were both just kind of like geeking out about it. And we were like, wow, man, this is so weird. Like you get me. And this is really interesting because I'm the same way. I'm a totally nut job creative. So whenever I'm creating, I feel like, it can be very challenging sometimes to explain like why I could be, having a conversation with someone and then totally zone out. And I'm like, oh my God, where am I? And I forgot and Quentin's like, dude, I do that all the time. Like, you do? Oh my God. I'm not the only.
I do it as well. So
do you really? That's amazing.
And it's funny. I can see on his face when he is. So sometimes I just stop and wait. And then I'm like, what's the last thing you remember me saying?
Yeah, totally. He's go. And I am the same way too. I think I'm a little more controlled than him a little bit. But but I just knew, and I knew he was just a genuinely good-hearted person. Yeah. And we both had the same sort of value system that I felt really that it gelled extremely well together. And then we just kind of went with it and been at it ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you alluded to it before we started recording, but how did you end up in Milwaukee? Yeah,
so my business partner, Kelly, she came into my life, let's see, probably, let me see, that was a year and a half ago, give or take. And she's an amazing nutritionist. And so we actually had a lot of similar friends. We connected on Facebook, and I was just like, listen, I don't focus on nutrition with my clients. That's not a thing for me. But I know I need to have that option. And so I was like, I would love to throw you some clients to see how this relationship goes and what we can do. So I signed out a few clients, and just everyone was raving about it. They were like, wow, she's so incredible. I love working with her. She's so thoughtful. She's so attentive and so knowledgeable. And I was, yeah, I know, she's great. And then we kept kind of going down the rabbit hole a bit, and I kept giving her clients. And then I think it was last July, she finally came out, and we just had this great couple of days of working together in Boston. And I was like, God, I love being in the same place with the person that I want to work with,
Yeah.
And so, she's married and has kids and stuff. So she was pretty much tied down here. And I was like, I'm at a point in my life where I'm ready to kind of pack my bags and go. And jokingly, last August, I think was it August? Yeah, it was mid-August. I was like, I should just move to Milwaukee. And she was like, you wouldn't. Jokingly, I'm like, no, seriously, I should. And so within a month to the day, I literally packed all my stuff and just moved, and that was it. It was and that was kind of it. And a lot of it too is based on the fact that we knew we were trying to transition out of Iron Force, but we weren't quite sure what we wanted to do yet. And so when we started to work together in person, that's when we started kind of seeing the CEO sector, the traveling CEO. We kind of had all these new concepts that came to fruition since I've been here. And she's the polar opposite of me and Quentin. So when and even with Mad Genie, she's now a partner with Mad Genie because I always say she's the glue that keeps Quentin and I completely level, because we're dreamers. We're dreamers and also doers, but she's more orchestrated. So she's like, guys, all right, stop it. Just Mike, what did you just say? Say that again. Yeah. Quentin, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, great. And like, then she'll be like, guys, did you pay your cell phone bills this week? I'm like, no, shoot. So she's so on the money with that stuff. And so, and we both, Quentin and I remember when he was talking to me about partnership, I was like, dude, we need Kelly, because you and I will literally spin each other to the ground, and we're never going to get there unless we have someone like keeping order while we can be chaotic. And so she's the kind of being
the Mad Genie mom as well.
She is, yeah, and she's mad to even put up with because Quentin and I also don't really sleep, and so we always joke about it. He texted me last week. I think it was like 4:15 in the morning or 3:45 or something like that. And I responded to him within a minute. And he's like, how are you still up? What are you doing? Don't you sleep? No, not whatever. And he was just like, dude, you're out of your mind. I'm like, what do you mean? You're still up? He goes, yeah, I know. But it's like, we're both completely out of our minds. So, but yeah, Kelly definitely keeps the madness to, like, she keeps us able to do what we want to do without completely burning the business to the ground. Yeah, she's amazing. She's been a great resource for us.
That's awesome. I've seen comments for people who are listening that aren't familiar. At this point, several of the Bold Moves podcast guests are all in this Facebook group, House of Starters, that Q started. And like Sierra Anastasia was a guest, and I think that's how she got introduced, because Q listened to her on there.
Yeah.
And Justin and you, and I've seen comments where like Q said, "Oh, I'm surprised Mike hasn't commented," and you're like, "I have to keep it to the point."
I know, right? Yeah, we both go back and forth a lot with each other. It's so funny.
Hilarious. We'll have to have like a meetup or something when I come home to Milwaukee, and
totally
I can be there in person with you guys.
Yeah.
I've never been in the same room as you or Q or Justin.
Oh man, energy. So. It's cool. And Justin's a new contact for me too. We actually just met last week for the first time, and he's so great. I love that kid. He has so much talent, and just I'm really looking forward to seeing his growth over the next year. Just from conversations we've had already, I'm like, man, like he gets it, and he's just he's very hungry and really driven to kind of achieve what he wants to do. So I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing his growth and helping him any way I can over the next year.
Absolutely. I love that. So the person that introduced Q to me is a former podcast guest that I knew from when I lived in Milwaukee named Hamad Fadayafar. Not sure if you know him or not.
No, I'm not sure.
But one thing that Hamad and I always bonded on that we spoke about is that we call ourselves everythingers. So instead of being someone with like a very clear one thing that they love to do, it's kind of like hopefully eventually a Richard Branson, where it's like, oh, music and travel and like
yeah, totally.
So it seems like you're very much an everythinger, and I think it's interesting when I speak to them, because I ask all of my guests this question, but when I encounter another everythinger, I'm a little more intrigued by the answer. And if you don't have an answer, that's perfectly okay.
Sure.
But I'm wondering if you know your purpose, and if so, what it is.
Sure. So yeah, first of all, I completely agree with the everythinger. I think that's, I've always, even so back when I was playing football and sports and stuff, I think I mentioned this earlier, I was always interested in other things. I was a skateboarder. I was into snowboarding. But for some reason, I have this slogan that I'm working with into a book I'm writing right now, and it's called "The Label That Couldn't Be Identified." And I feel that's me to a T, because if someone said, "Oh, Mike's just a personal trainer," or "Mike's just this," I'm like, well, no, you don't understand. You don't even know who the hell I am, actually. Like, let's have a conversation, and you'll learn really fast that there's a lot more to me than just that. And so, being an everythinger is definitely something I feel like, I like to have my hands in a little bit of everything. I like to sort of keep my weeks and days very interesting. And so when people ask me what I did today, I don't want to be like, oh, I worked. It's like, actually, I had 7 meetings. I did this and that, whatever. I worked out. Like, there's always like a very fulfilling day. Yeah. So my purpose, I think, is interesting. I would say I'm self-driven. I've come from a family, my direct family were not entrepreneurs. None of them were business professionals. None of them were really creative either. And so my mom's always like, I don't know where the hell you came from. Honestly, like, she's like, you were like the black sheep, but in the best way. I'm like, I don't know. And so, but I did have a few family members that were business owners and that were entrepreneurs and stuff. But it was like, but no one taught me that. You know what I mean? No one showed me what like in school I failed. Like the school system failed me because no one could explain why I thought the way I thought, or really showed me like how to harness that. And so I think the reason I got so into music and so creative and writing and stuff, because I was so bored with what I was learning in school. Yeah. But if someone was like, hey, we're going to take that creative writing, let's see how to do this, that, whatever. I feel like I would have totally embraced that 1,000%. And I think my purpose at this stage of my life, I would say, without question, is eventually, I definitely have this sort of knack for understanding someone's limiting belief, right? And so my purpose is to always find out what someone's disbelief about themselves actually is, and teach them very quickly how that needs to change and how they can look at their life and go, wait a minute, your limiting belief is X because of these reasons. So when you eliminate that and focus and use that as fuel, this is where the potential of what you can reach is going to actually skyrocket to. And I think that the reason I say I would say purpose, that's probably one of my purposes for sure, is to teach people how to reach further into what they're actually capable of doing. And I think the other portion is just teaching people to love, right? And I say this very generally speaking, because part of my bigger why is to eventually develop a platform with creatives, musicians, artists, everything, to go to high schools to speak about bullying. That's a really big passion for me, because there was something that affected me growing up for sure, but also I've just seen so much of it in my life, and I've stood up for so many people about it. And I think it's something that's always typically swept under the rug, and it bothers me to no end. And I think it's something that if you see a guy in high school in a suit and tie and he's talking about bullying, no one's going to relate to him. But when you see your favorite musician on stage talking about it, you're like, wait a minute, this dude gets it, or this woman gets it. Like, so I think that sort of correlation of perception of it totally changes. And so I think that's part of my burning desire, to develop a platform and a program that infiltrates people to sort of have a voice and not feel like they're the only person. And when you see someone that's, one of their favorite musicians or actors talking about being bullied in their life, you're like, wait a minute, they were bullied too? It's almost like this sort of support system. And I think that's something I love to eventually get into for sure, when my time is a bit more focused. I can devote majority of my time to that.
That's very cool. I know you mentioned listening to Lady Gaga and the back in the day.
Totally.
But she does a lot of anti-bullying
totally
work as well, which I think is cool.
If you get a chance, it's gut wrenching. But if you watch a documentary called Bully, it is really heartbreaking. I watched that probably 4 years ago, and I was like a ball of tears the entire time. It's a really sad story. And these poor kids, 12, even younger, killing themselves, committing suicide because they're being bullied, and no one cares. I'm like, what is going on? Like, that should never happen. Like, what? Oh God. So I just feel like, I feel like especially middle America, there's so much wrong with how they're approaching bullying. And amongst other things, but God forbid you have long hair, or you're gay or lesbian, and anything. And if you stand out and you're weird, you're outcasted and you're ostracized for it. And it's terrible. So I think teaching people to actually love themselves first and foremost for whoever they are and whoever they show up with is very, very, very important to me. And I think that correlates with the bullying campaign that I really feel like I want to develop a really great program for that.
The craziest thing about what you said about the people who stand out in any way is if those people could just make it through high school,
Yeah.
once they get to college, they're the coolest people
Oh,
because
totally.
everyone's
Yeah.
tired of all of the people who
Yeah.
don't stand out. Like,
Yeah. And what I guess what it's hard to, how can I explain it? It's hard to sort of teach these kids and help them realize that, like, the kids that are making fun of them are the ones that end up losing in life. And that's what they need to realize.
Absolutely.
And without fail, I remember, actually, you know what? I totally forgot about this story until just right now. I was in Nashville, Tennessee at a truck stop getting a drink or something. And this girl came up to me and she goes, "Mike?" And I was like, "What? Yeah? Like, who the hell are you?" And she was like, "Oh my God, like, I haven't seen you in forever, this, that, whatever." And I was, I'm literally, I was so.
You're just standing there like, okay.
Yeah, because you know when you forget someone's name and you're like, "Hey man, what's up? Cool." And you're like, "I want to sit." I forget. It's home. No cause. Well, turned out she was a girl my sophomore year in high school that was pretty overweight at the time, and she was a transfer student, and people were making fun of her like all the time. And we actually had a few classes, probably I think 3 or 4 classes together. So I just kind of took her under my wing. I'm like, "Listen, like, we're gonna hang. Like, let's be friends. Like, let's just hang out." And we had a lot of mutual interests with music, and I influenced her to just start working out with me and stuff like that. Yeah. And so that was right after that. She actually transferred. I think she was an army kid. So they got deployed. Her father got deployed, so she went off to, I don't really know where she went, because after that summer, going into my sophomore summer, I never heard from her again. And we didn't have cell phones in high school or anything like that. So I lost contact with her until, let me see, probably 10 years, 11 years later. And she looked like a completely different person. She said, like, I helped influence her to live a healthy life. And if it wasn't for me, she probably wouldn't have made it through that year. And like all these things, I gave her all this confidence. And I was like, "Really? Like, what?" And then I actually met her husband. He was there too, and her couple of kids. And I was like, "That's so crazy." I was like, "That's amazing." And so, but like, I just remember that feeling. This is back in 2006 or something like that. No, this is 2007. I just remember that feeling of like, wow, like, this girl, I just, in passing, like, was just nice to. I just extended my, "Hey, you want to sit down with me? Hey, you want to talk about books? You want to talk about music?" Like, and that's all it takes, literally. Just being the one person in a sea of thousands to go, "Hey, you know what? You're cool. Let's hang out." And that's all it takes. I'm like, what's so hard for people to realize that? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that story was a big factor into me start to think about, the bigger sort of play with the bullying factor, for sure.
Yeah. Have you seen that Burger King commercial? Like, I hate that I'm bringing up that. They actually did something really cool. Did you?
Is that right? I'm not sure.
Okay.
I actually don't. Okay.
I don't know if I don't have TV, so I don't know if it was.
I don't either, actually.
But it was going viral or a viral-ish.
Sure.
But basically, they had these hidden cameras in Burger Kings, and they had actors set up bullying like middle school-looking kids.
Interesting.
And like, they show other patrons in the Burger King like looking and not doing anything, and a couple of them eventually do come up and either like you said, just start talking to the kid who's being bullying, or they defend him and tell the other kids to like get out of here or whatever.
Totally.
But then they also, with the same customer group, show the people behind the counter are like punching these Whoppers and then giving the customers the Whoppers. And of course, the customers aren't having it. They're like,
"Yeah, sure.
What?" And he was like, "Oh, I just bullied the burger. Like, what's the problem?"
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so you gotta watch it.
Crazy.
Like, I hate that I'm promoting.
No, totally. No.
They can do some things correctly.
That's awesome. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, the contrast of like, well, why is that okay? But that is
wow. That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's so dope.
Yeah, I gotta check that out.
Oh yeah, I'll watch that too. I actually got rid of my TV about 1.5 years ago, as well, and I just have Netflix really on my phone
Yeah.
or whatever, and like my
Same.
computer and stuff. And like, I don't miss it. I really don't. Like, people are like,
Mhm.
how do you get through life? I'm like, dude, I have too much ambition to be contained to a screen. And well, let me rephrase that. I'm contained to my screen in much
Yeah.
different ways. And yeah, and I just feel like I don't ever watch the news. I don't really ever know what's going on
Right.
in a lot of ways. But like, when something mass tragedy happens, obviously, usually one of my social channels has it. Bless you.
Right. Thank you.
And so I usually find out that way. But yeah,
Right.
I don't miss it. I don't want it in my life. I feel like it's such a time waster, and it's yeah, I have no desire like at all
Yeah.
to have one anymore.
Right. And there's enough. I mean, Netflix is killing it.
Oh,
There's so much good stuff,
Yeah.
and you can do it on your terms. I know, like TiVo, and you can DVR, but
Yep.
I don't know. I'm still working through Stranger Things season 2. So
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, no, they're crushing it. I mean, they've really upped the ante, especially with their their Netflix owned TV shows and stuff. I love
Yeah.
it. It's so good.
Yeah.
They're doing so well. I love it.
Right. And I can't imagine having time to fit more in. And I'm perfectly fine waiting for like Scandal to come like a year later. It's fine with it. I just don't talk.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, I'm like, other Scandal fans, just don't tell me so that it doesn't ruin it for me.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome.
So I'm guessing it wasn't to get rid of your TV, but I'm curious about the scariest thing that you've ever done.
The scariest thing I've ever done. Oh man, that's a really. I would say scariest thing I've ever done, probably talk to my dad about, like, we had a really I think we had a really weird upbringing for the most part. It was kind of one of those things where he was present, he was in my life, but it was kind of like, how can I explain it? But he was very detached emotionally. So
Okay.
I think, and that affected me a lot, especially in my adolescent years, kind of coming to age and sort of needing that sort of father figure in my life to kind of maybe give me some guidance. And I resented him for most of my life. I had a really chip on my shoulder, unfortunately, with him. And then we had this really good talk, and actually I was working with this therapist for a while, and she was amazing at just kind of helping me see things a little bit, like a little clearer than what I was at the time. And we had this really open conversation about my feelings to him, and like, and how and why I didn't want to hold on to that resentment anymore, because it was really not doing me any good in my life.
Yeah.
And that was extremely challenging for me, because I just knew, like, I was like, God, I've never done anything like this with him. We've never really talked like in depth about anything emotional. It's always been pretty like kind of surface for the most part. And so having that conversation was incredible. You know, he cried, I cried. It was one of those deals. And then after that, I remember our whole relationship changed, because I stopped expecting something from him that I knew I would never get, and just appreciated what I had. And then our relationship skyrocketed from that. And so I think, but it was that building up the courage to even do that and sit down with him was like, it took me like weeks. It was the weirdest thing. Like, and I was like, gosh, why am I so nervous about this? And why is it so hard for me to talk to him about it? But it was because it affected me so much for almost all my life. And when we had that conversation, I just remember I felt this like sigh of relief. I felt like every day thereafter was so much better. You know what I mean? And now, like I said, like what the relationship I have with him now is amazing. And I love my dad so much, because again, like I stopped looking at him to kind of get something that I knew I wasn't going to get. And when I just appreciated him for who he is and what he has to offer, then the relationship like just became what it is now. So I think that was probably it.
That's awesome. And that's extremely inspiring as well. I'm curious, because my follow-up question to that is, I think, going to be even more interesting coming from you, since you said that your purpose is to help people see their limiting beliefs and push past that. So I'm always curious when people share what their scariest thing they've done, how they recommend pushing past that fear. So obviously it paid off hugely for you.
Sure.
That your relationship improved so much, but how did you, after those weeks of, you know, preparing for it, or if you want to give a more general response for anyone who needs to push past
no, so actually that'll probably tie into kind of a book that I'll probably recommend to you, but I believe in owning and extreme ownership of yourself, right?
Okay.
And I think when I realized that I had to make that decision, it was something that I just knew. It's like I'm not going to be able to sleep. I'm not going to be able to function the way I need to in my life if I don't have this conversation. So no matter how terrified or emotionally challenging it was for me to even muster up the courage to do it, I remember working out one day and I was just like destroying this. I was like destroying this kettlebell, and I just remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm too angry. I'm holding too much anger in my life, and I felt very much like it's just, I didn't want to harness as much anger anymore, and I didn't want to look at my dad in resentment. I wanted to be able to look at him in a better light. So I just remember writing down pros to what would occur from that conversation, and then the cons of not doing it. And when I did that, I remember like the pros were just like massive, and the cons were like 4 or 5, but the cons were really harsh. It was like, you know, I'm going to bring this into potentially if I ever have kids, like, and bring all this with me, and I'm not going to be as good of a dad or as attentive, and all these things started to kind of, that surface. And I said, Mike, what are you doing? Just go talk, just talk to him. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? So I think it was that sort of very open and honest conversation to not repeat history and really focus on carving out a new path for me that I felt I needed to do. And once I did, and that could have gone one of two ways. It could have been the same exact way in my life, or it could have been what happened. But I just knew as long as I said my piece, I was happy with, like I always say this, like, you can't predict how someone's going to react when you make a decision, right? That's going to benefit your life that may bother them or hurt them. But it comes back to, I just knew that at that time in my life, if I didn't do it, I would be stuck viciously. And once I made that decision, it was kind of on, and I was just like, yep, that's it. That's all I'm going to do.
I love that. I think that's a great strategy. And I love the adjectives that you use. Like you said, extreme ownership of self, and like stuck viciously. And my first impression of you is through Instagram, because I think Q introduced us that way or something.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But you write on Instagram. So I'm surprised that hasn't come up at all yet, because I just trusted Q's recommendation, and I'm like, is this guy's bold moves that he's a writer now? And we haven't even talked about that.
Yeah,
so
sure, I know.
Touch on that a bit.
Yeah, definitely, totally. So writing took the place of music for me, for sure. It's definitely been, I've always been a writer since I was a kid. I've always expressed myself better through an instrument or words. And for a long time, I couldn't really talk about my feelings to people. I always found it extremely difficult. And so, but I could write about it. I could talk about it. I could find notes on a guitar to express how I felt. And so I would say probably the last couple of years, I've been just writing prolifically, just constantly. And I discovered probably last year a different style of writing that is a lot more, it's storytelling, it's poetry, but it's not the same. I guess it's not poetry in that way. I try to write really impactful stories in a very short space. And so Instagram, obviously you're only allowed a certain amount of words. I think it's actually, I forget what that actually it is. But so it forced me to get to the point and kind of hit people emotionally the way music does. So I try to find words that resonate with people in a very visually, emotionally jarring way. And so my writing now is the book I'm finishing right now for this year. It's a book of poetry, but it's more looking at life through multiple lenses and how our perception of how you and I see the same picture, I take away this massive thought process from it, and you will as well. but they will not even come close to aligning. And so I think how we view life is so individual. And I think I always talk about it in a way where when we go to the eye doctor and we're getting our eyes checked and they're doing like multiple different things with sort of seeing what type of prescriptions you need for your glasses, if you wear them or not. They're going through, everything's distorted, and then it's really clear, and then it's not, and one side's distorted. That's kind of how I write. So I want people to never really, I want people to have to reread my writing like multiple times to be like, is this what he's talking about? Wow, is this it? But maybe it's this, and I'll never tell you what it's about. And I also, it's hard for me to go back to re-edit stuff because I'll write it, I'll review it, I'll post it sometimes, and stuff that I haven't posted that's for the book. It's like I write it that day, I'll read it about 150 times, and I'll do it like laying down. I'll read it on my phone. I'll go like all over the place, and then I'm like, yeah, this feels right. And then the next day, I'll never read it again. I'll never read that piece ever again. And it's very hard for me to go back now to have to re-edit stuff or look at it again because in the moment, it's like, it's very hard for me because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to read those words again because I wrote it like at that time. So would sing through, especially a song emotionally for them. I can't imagine having to sing that every night. I go on my mind.
Absolutely. So I think when people think of Instagram, they think of pictures and it being a visual platform. Yes. So how do you work that to be writing?
Yeah. So typically on Instagram, I started doing a thing where I'll find a picture that resonates with me. And I'm like, oh, I love this picture. This is so cool. And then I'll look at it for a couple of minutes and I'll write a story about that picture or how I feel about that picture, what it makes me, so what emotions pull out of me during that time. And it only takes me a couple of minutes to write those posts. It's not long at all. Yeah. But the picture is, I would say 80% of the equation because it has to embody what the piece does without actually ever telling you what the piece is about. Okay.
And where do you find the pictures?
This little thing called Google.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, or sometimes Instagram as well. But it's it's weird. Like, and again, it's hard. I don't know why people actually always comment about how cool the pictures are, and I'm always like, I don't know. I just have this thing. I have to like. That's one thing I always talk about, like scaling out. I'm like, I can never scale that because that's why I love to find those pictures, and no one's ever going to do it the way I need them to. So I'm always like, no, that's something it's very personal to me. Yeah. But yeah, so that's going to be that's been a really interesting process this year, finishing that book.
Cool. So if people want to, see what we're talking about and read what you're writing or see anything else that you do, where can you be found online?
So Instagram writing page is Casavant, Casavant, writings, WRITINGS. There's for anything that I'm writing as far as poetry wise, I'll post on there. LinkedIn, Mike Casavant. You can find me. It's probably going to be linked to Mad Genie and Iron Force Athletics. IronForceAthletics.com will be dissolved in about a month, so I wouldn't necessarily say find me on there. But yeah, mainly Instagram and LinkedIn is where I'm at right now, pretty much officially.
Okay, pretty cool. I love that. All right, you mentioned, sort of alluded to the book that you were going to recommend.
Yes.
So what is your required reading for the
So newer book that came into my life that's called Discipline Equals Freedom. And
Jocko.
Yes, Jocko. Oh my God. He is phenomenal. And that's in his other book, Extreme Ownership, that's actually where I got that sort of term because his approach to life is just so amazing to me. And it's so real. And I just love that he destroys every ounce of whatever your limiting factors are, it doesn't matter. Like he's like, just get up and go do it. Like just stop it. Stop convincing yourself that you're too young or you don't have enough money or you don't have. Just go do it. And I was like, this guy gets me so much. I'm like, this is so great because I feel like people walk that sort of. Like he's very black and white. That's how I am too. I'm like, I hate gray areas. I don't like to be like, I'm sort of into it, but I'm not. It's like, no, I just don't like it. Actually, it's funny because Quentin and I, Actually, Quentin and I were dying about this last week. I went to this haunted house out here in Milwaukee called The Hills Have Eyes, and I love Halloween. It's my favorite time of year or whatever. And it was awful. I hated it. This is the worst experience. It was so overpriced. And I was just not entertained. Yeah. And so we were at the coffee shop, and Brian, the barista, was like, "Hey, how was The Hills of Eyes?" I'm like, "Oh, it was awful." Like, it was just like so blunt. And Quentin like spit out his coffee. Yeah, he's like, "Dude, you're so from Massachusetts, man. Like, you're so ridiculous." But it's like, yeah. But I just feel like that book right now has been. That's probably going to be something that I'll reread consistently, or at least recommend to people, especially if I feel like they're at a point in their life where maybe they're not living up to their potential. And I'm like, listen, go read this book.
I think most
just
people
read
are
it.
at that point in their life.
Totally. No, seriously. And I think it is. And I think there's so much to be said with, just beating yourself to an oblivion physically, and then just going, wow, I feel so much better about myself. Let's see what else I can accomplish. And I think his approach is pretty aggressive, but I think it's really needed in most people's circumstances for sure.
So you've read both of his books. Would you recommend both in a specific order, or are you really focused on the Discipline is Freedom?
I would say Discipline Equals Freedom is a really it's very written really cool, but it's very quick to digest because it's very straightforward. I would say maybe start with that and then shift into Extreme Ownership, because I think Extreme Ownership actually was my first introduction to him, which was incredible. But I think this would probably be a quicker sort of adaptation to what he's doing that you can sort of gel with and move on to Extreme Ownership. And then obviously his podcast as well, which is incredible.
Yeah, I haven't heard his podcast, but I have. My first introduction was he was on maybe Tim Ferriss. I don't know which podcast I heard him on, but then a couple months ago I went to the Success Magazine Success Live event in Long Beach, and he was one of the speakers there.
Oh, so good.
And so yeah, it was awesome. But like, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, no, seriously, it is. It's intimidating. You have to be out of your mind. Like, I was just talking to a buddy of mine about going to SEAL Fit. Have you ever heard of that at all?
I think so. Yeah.
It's in San Diego. One of the guys, I always forget his name, but he created this program. He's a CrossFit affiliate as well, but it's literally just it's like Hell Week, and you just go there and you get beaten to an oblivion physically, and like they push you to beyond your max, and it's like, it just challenges you so much. And when you leave, it's like you could be there for 3 days and now all of a sudden you're like this totally new person. Yeah. I love stuff like that. I just love seeing like where my breaking points are and trying to go as far past them as I possibly can. And so eventually I'd love to maybe work out with that guy, Jocko, at some point. I think it'd be pretty cool.
Have you ever heard of Jesse Itzler? Are you familiar with him?
That sounds familiar.
So he's married to Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx. She's
I'm very familiar with Sarah. Yeah, she's great.
So it's her husband, and he started basically a Airbnb for jets for executives. Where
cool.
Basically rent jets as you need them, private jets.
And what's it called? What's his business called?
I think that was Marquis Jet, but he sold that and moved on. And then he started working with a coconut water company, which he sold for tons of money to Coca-Cola, I think.
Oh, wow.
But he seems to have a similar style as you. And so he actually hired a Navy SEAL to live with him for 30 days.
That's amazing. I would love that. That would be so great. Yeah.
Did whatever he said.
Yeah, totally.
And so he does these 100-mile runs, and
that would destroy me.
Yeah. But I believe he wrote a book about his experience with
cool. Okay.
So I don't know the name of the book, but Jesse Itzler is the guy.
Jesse Itzler. Okay. I'm going to follow him too. That's incredible. Yeah. And Sarah Blakely's story is amazing. I love her so much. She's so great. Yeah. Such a great entrepreneur and such a powerful businesswoman. I just love her whole approach. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Awesome. So the 2 books by Jocko. Do you have any other book recommendations you'd like to share?
I love The One Thing. It's a great book. Okay. I found that was really influential for me in the last couple of years. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I Will Teach You to Be Rich was a fascinating read for me about 5 years ago. That's always been by a guy named Ramit Sethi, who's incredible. Just his whole approach to finances, that it was not. It was the most unorthodox way of understanding finances at the time, and I was like, God, he's so right. And he had this very very approachable topics with finances and how to save properly and how to invest properly. And that book really changed my life, I think, in a lot of regards. I'm trying to think. It's funny. I just had like 2 other books I wanted to recommend too.
Well, if they come to you, you can always email me, or you can just blurt them out if we're still chatting.
Oh God, it's Pitch Anything. That's another book that I love. Okay. Just because of the fact that it's ways to sort of power frame what you do in a 30-second pitch, and sort of kind of help you just, especially if you're trying to pitch your business to find investors or anything like that. It's a way to really hone in on what you're doing and who you're trying to attract and what your main mission is within a very short period of time. So I thought that was really an interesting book as well.
Very cool. Now, how about any other general advice, like anything that you've learned that's impacted you profoundly, or anything that you wish someone had told you long ago? Any life advice for the listeners or viewers would be fabulous.
I mean, I would say one of my early mentors, Morty Eagle. He's passed away now, but his story and rise to his business success was just phenomenal to me. And his whole approach to life was, if you want anything, don't wait for it, just go take it. And not in a criminal way or anything, but just meaning like, don't wait, because if the longer you wait, the faster someone else is going to step in and take whatever it is that you're trying to get away from you. And that was in his story really quickly, was that he was very new in his field. His business was just starting out. There was a contract in Boston, and there was about 15 other very well-known companies ahead of him that were all bidding for the same contract. And if he got this contract, it would have put him on the map, and it would have set him up for a really successful start of his new business. His appointment was literally 2 weeks after. So he had an appointment, and it was set for about 2 weeks later. He hung up the phone with the secretary, went into Boston, walked into the office. The secretary's like, "Can I help you?" He goes, "No, I'm just here to see so-and-so." And he walked right into this guy's office. And this is like, I think it might have been the 40s or something like that. I'm not sure. But it was, he was such a baller in that regard. He had just the utmost grit. Walked in, said who he was. They had a conversation. The guy gave him 3 minutes to explain why he should work with him and nobody else. And 10 minutes later, they shook hands, and he got the gig. And I was like, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Goosebumps. That's
right.
Cool.
And so, and I always picture like Mad Men. Like I feel like he was just like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Because he was about 83 when he passed away. So, but man, he was amazing with that type of stuff. So I think that's my biggest life advice. I would say is definitely just don't wait for things. There's never a perfect time. Just go out and do it and just make it happen.
I love that. So you mentioned he was one of your first mentors. How have you found your mentors in the past?
I found them through Craigslist, which was really interesting.
Okay.
I always say they find me in a lot of ways. And then I would say his wife, Barbara, is still a mentor of mine to this day. I still work with her 3 times a week through FaceTime. When I'm home, I'm always at her house for days. We talk about investing correctly. We talk about, the things I'm not doing because I don't listen to her all the time. And she's like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Just do what I'm telling you to do." I'm like, "All right, Barb." So, she is so amazing, and she's influenced so much in my life. And talk about books to recommend and everything else. I mean, she's really been prolific for me. So, I think it's a mentor in retrospect. It could be as simple as a guy at the coffee shop that I grab coffee with every once in a while, or I see him and we just have a life conversation, and I leave and I'm like, my God, he's so right. That's awesome. But the ones I have that I've two in particular right now in my life. Both are actually clients of mine originally, and then we became more. Once the sort of client relationship sort of changed, we've just kind of always been in each other's lives, and it's been pretty interesting.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So final question.
Yes.
Is if Mike at 8 years old had a crystal ball and could see where you are now and all the things that you've done in between, as well as the, immediate foreseeable future on the horizon, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Mike be for his future?
I would say probably a 20. Yeah, no, I am. I'm super excited because I think this is a great time for me just because I'm pivoting. I'm sort of channeling my efforts into a new area with personal branding and consulting with Mad Genie, and then obviously went really hyper focused this year and finishing the year strong, finishing my book. So I think there's just creatively and content and different things I'm putting out, I feel like I'm in the right space for a deeper growth that I'd like to see going into next year. So yeah, I definitely say I'm really pretty excited for what's to come for sure.
That's awesome. I'm excited for you too.
Thank you. Likewise.
Well, thanks. Thank you for your time and sharing your story.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you for having me. Seriously, it's awesome.
My pleasure.
See what I mean? Rock star, strength conditioning coach, big guy. Seems like a big teddy bear. I don't know. That's maybe just my assessment. Sorry, Mike. I don't think that would offend you. You seem in touch enough with your masculinity that you could handle a comment like that. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Mike as much as I did. And I hope you enjoyed it so much that you share it with your friends, because I would love to inspire as many people as possible. And I can't inspire them if they don't hear these amazing stories. And they won't hear them unless you share it. So please do that. Another way that you can help get this to more ears and eyes is by leaving a positive review on iTunes, because that will activate the magical algorithm that makes iTunes start telling people, suggesting that this would be a cool podcast for them to check out. So please do that as well. Also, this is not the only incredible story or podcast from this show, so make sure that you subscribe so that you can get a challenge from Mike on Friday and be ready for another fantastic interview next Monday. I know that in between these two episodes there is Thanksgiving, so if that is something you celebrate, happy Thanksgiving. And even if it isn't, it never hurts to have gratitude, even if the origin of the holiday is less than positive. You can still be thankful for the other wonderful things in our lives. All right, that's all for now. Again, happy Thanksgiving. I am grateful for you. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.